we've got some folks from Checkpoint. Fareed and Eric Owings are going to give a presentation here around Checkpoint. Let me kind of pull up my slides. Hold on just a minute. And then we're going to get into this fun with steak. And this Boterman, barbecue with Boterman, he just has a whole bunch of great information, you know, about grilling, about the kind of steaks you guys have gotten, the whole thing. So I think you're going to have a good time there. As we go through this, on the first part, kind of the technical part, you know, feel free to shout out any kind of questions, anything like that, okay?
Cool.
I've got a couple of slides I wanted to go through, and then I'm going to turn it over to Eric and the Checkpoint crew. You guys have probably seen this slide or similar ones before, right? You know, this whole movement to SASE and to security, and you know, Gartner kind of takes a look at, you know, what are the particular things happening at the edge, and you know, what are the WAN services, et cetera. And there's been an ongoing conversation, right, about, is SASE a platform, or is it, you know, pulling together different parts and pieces? And we clearly, I kind of label this as Matt SASE. Our approach at CBTS has really been kind of a best of breed of bringing together components to deliver that SASE experience, right? Now, it starts out with VeloCloud. VeloCloud for us has been a wildly successful product. We've got some 700 VeloCloud customers, about 7,000 locations. We're continuing to win business every month on it. In fact, we were actually VeloCloud's last reigning partner of the year. They didn't do one because of COVID last. But for us, it's been very strong. Their DMPO technology, their forward error correction, actually being able to fix packet loss across an environment, even out to SaaS applications, their gateways. And these gateways we use to connect to, you know, secure web gateway services or other SaaS. You know, we've got VeloCloud customers that we connect to Zscaler, to Palo Prisma. Checkpoint is our chosen, you know, kind of bundled product that we do here today, and we're going to go through that. We've had a lot of success. We're actually the first service provider to help them launch that product as a bundled product in the SD-WAN world. So you're going to hear today from Eric and team really about kind of the pieces that we use, the secure web gateway, the ZTNA services, firewall services, you know, those kinds of things that we use to bundle together from the Checkpoint side and the Velo to give one consistent SASE, you know, experience. I did write this word Franken-SASE down here. And this is a lot of what we're seeing in the industry, is that we come in with VeloCloud, but customers may have their own endpoint protection. You know, let's say they're already a Trend Micro shop, or, you know, they're a McAfee shop, but they need secure web gateway services, maybe with a VPN client or ZTNA, and we'll pull Checkpoint in. Or maybe we get in there and they've already got a CASB solution, but again, they need secure web gateway, these kinds of things. So we've had a lot of success, particularly in the mid-market, of being able to understand and meet customers where they are, what security components they've already got investments in, and then how do we bring all that together in kind of one SASE solution. So I'm going to turn it over to Eric here, and Eric's going to kind of take control of the screen here and go through a little bit of the presentation of some new and exciting stuff that Checkpoint's doing, and how we're, you know, what parts we're using to incorporate into this kind of experience. So go ahead, Eric.
Perfect. Thanks, Matt. Give me 1 second. All right. Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Matt, for teeing that up. So I want to go over just kind of like how Checkpoint views SASE and the different components that make up our solution, like Matt mentioned. So one thing that, you know, a lot of people, I think everybody on the call has experience with Checkpoint, but you'd be surprised, it's something that, you know, we kind of need to restate it in customer facing meetings, because a lot of times they'll kind of view us as like a legacy company or a hardware company. And that's not true at all, right? Like, we've been around for 25 plus years, but when you look at SASE, it's really the convergence of networking and security. So with all that intelligence and, you know, decades of experience that we have, I think that uniquely positions us in this space, as opposed to a lot of the startups that you'll see, right? So your customers can really be confident and choosing Checkpoint solutions, because we're taking all that expertise and what we're doing is we're just moving that over to the cloud, right? So we like to take a use case based approach. SASE is very much a journey. There's not just a, your customers aren't going to come to you and say, hey, we want SASE and here's one nice neat SKU for it, and they just go and plop something in there. So we take a use case driven approach, starting with the pain points that people are feeling. With everything and the way the world's changed lately. Number one, security. Now that we have more people kind of all over the place accessing it, you really want to limit that attack surface, and you don't want somebody to have full access to the network, only the tools that they need to perform their job. From a performance standpoint, it no longer makes sense to backhaul everything through HQ and through the data center. So you really want to have that good performance. And that really kind of parlays into the user experience. And this is something that's really top of mind for a lot of organizations and security teams and networking teams, because if something's not working and they hear about it, and it makes their life a lot more painful. And you want the business to be able to operate as efficiently as possible. And then just the operational issues that come with these legacy systems, right? If you have something like a traditional VPN, for example, complaints we hear is, updating the hardware and the maintenance and upkeep and everything that people have to do to go into that. They just don't have the bandwidth to do that anymore. They want something that they don't have to worry about, that doesn't have the extra heavy lifting. So it's time to really just kind of rethink how we're doing network security. So if you look at the analyst community, you'll see Gartner has a slide kind of similar to this. They've got a couple more puzzle pieces in there, but we really tried to boil it down and make it a little less confusing for people. You'll see some stuff where like CASB and DLP is a little bit redundant, right? But these are generally kind of the use cases that we're looking at solving from a Checkpoint standpoint when we're going down that SASE journey with customers. So really what it means to us and the pillars that we stand on when we're talking about this solution. First of all, we want to consolidate your cloud and your networking security, right? So Matt mentioned best of breed, and I would say that we're more in kind of like a balanced best of breed. So we definitely want to be sensitive to investments that people have made, but also, you don't want somebody where they're so overwhelmed because they've been buying, on the full spectrum of best of breed for the better part of a decade now. And every solution has its own management console, and it needs somebody trained on it. And, when someone leaves the organization, there's a knowledge gap there. So they do want some operational efficiencies there. Next is zero trust network access. And this is really kind of just becoming the de facto standard for how we're treating access to corporate resources, no matter where you're located. Secure connectivity. So as part of our job and knowledge workers, everybody's going to different sites. They're browsing around. They have, corporate sanctioned applications as well. A lot of SaaS applications that are just exploding. So making sure that when they're doing that and accessing all that, it's in a secure manner. And then last, at the foundation of it, you want to have really excellent threat prevention. And that's something that, again, as Checkpoint, we've been building on for over 2.5 decades, all that threat intelligence that we bring to the table. So when you talk about our solution specifically, we break that down into two products essentially. So we have our corporate remote access, and then we have our Harmony Connect internet access is what we'll talk about. So first, let's go and look at the remote access. And this comes in a couple of different flavors. So the first one that I want to show everyone today is our clientless solution. So with this, it's very much from a user experience. It's very clean. It's like a SaaS application that they're used to working with on a day-to-day basis, very much like opening up Salesforce on my laptop. So it's that browser-based clientless experience. And a couple things that we're doing here. So one thing is, we're doing layer 7 access only. So employees and end users and third-party users that we see a lot of people using it for third-party like partners and channel and suppliers, is they're only having access to those applications and resources they need access to. So we're reducing the attack surface. If someone doesn't really just have like broad access, east and west, lateral movement now to the network, which is a huge win. Next, we're building in full visibility. So we have auditing. If somebody's doing an SSH or an RDP session, for example, we're able to do screen recordings and full sessions. And web applications, we're able to log, post, and get. So if for forensic standpoint, they need to go back and do any kind of audit, they have all that access to all that information. And then also for your power users that maybe need privileged access management tools or something like that to spin up an SSH session, we have a lightweight version of that built in as well. So we want to make that very straightforward for our users. And this is something, again, when I was mentioning use cases, this is where I think we really shine, especially against some of the other solutions that you'll see out there in the market. Most other companies are going to be highly focused on this web access piece of it and web applications. But we understand that, organizations are very complex, and you may have users like myself in the sales side, and that's all I need is some kind of access like that, right? But then you have different power users, and they're going to need to open up RDP sessions, SSH sessions, and different things like that, right? So we want to make sure out of the box that we're focusing on the most protocols to fit use cases for customers and make this a flexible solution. And then the next piece of it, I mentioned that we have two flavors of it, is our layer 3 full VPN as a service solution, right? So when you do have your power users and they need more of that traditional layer 3 access, we're able to provide that. So the way that we're seeing organizations deploy this is, for those users that don't need that full access, they're deploying it at the layer 7 level and, limiting what they have access to only to do their job, which is a huge security win. And then for those users, you can segment out that may need maybe a little bit more of a power user. All right, so next, let's talk about our internet access portion of it. So I'll go ahead and build the slide out here. So with this, we have a few different use cases, and this is kind of where, again, on that slide, I mentioned things like CASB and DLP and, fitting multiple use cases come into play. So with threat prevention, number one, we have all that intelligence, and we have the Checkpoint Threat Cloud that we're leveraging that, we've been working on, and we've been the experts in networking and security for over 2.5 decades. So protecting your users against, 0 days, against phishing, malware, ransomware, all those things, the next gen stuff that's coming out as well. We have access control, and this is something key. We have built in over 8,600 applications. So we're making sure that people really only have access to what they need. And we're able to do things like, firewall as a service and URL filtering. And then lastly, that DLP. And I'll show you guys just kind of a screenshot with an example here of building out a simplistic version of a rule. So a quick screen grab from one of our management consoles. We have a user, and the company here is using Google Drive. We want to make sure that Jane Smith, when she's trying to upload or working within Google Drive, that she is restricted from uploading sensitive data. So at this point, we've just put it to HIPAA and PCI data. Obviously, we don't want that to be publicly facing or uploaded where people can access that data, right? So you can come in, and again, across those 8,600 plus applications that we're adding to every day, you can really build some powerful policies to protect that data. Let's see.
Let me add a little, Eric, let me add just a little bit here too. So Eric just basically talked about the ZTNA client, the VPN client, and secure web gateway services, right? Now those secure web gateway services you could either use the client if you care to. So I could use the client on my desktop and be protected in network, but when I leave the network and go sit at Starbucks, I have the same protection. But we also, because of what we do in VeloCloud, basically is take that entire location, let's say it's branch 1, and route that traffic to a firewall, right? And so we can also protect clientless devices as well. So somebody doesn't have to run the client to have these same kinds of protections. The other thing inside of VeloCloud as well is that we've gotten very good at also segmenting traffic. So we might decide that we want to take certain devices, certain users, certain VLANs, and send that to Checkpoint Secure Web Gateway Services. But maybe guest VLAN, we want to dump that straight out the internet, or guest VLAN is going to go to some local firewall. So that's the other thing we do in this kind of combined VeloCloud and Checkpoint world, is sit with the customer, understand where their applications are sitting today, where they have to get to them, and then what kinds of internet kind of security rules we want to apply, and what portions of this and how we want to segment it. So this is part of the consulting we provide, and we bring these services together.
Thanks, Matt. Excellent points. Yeah, and when we're talking about implementing it, I think one thing where we shine, like I mentioned, we've got the Checkpoint Threat Cloud, and we've been building this technology for a long time. and some of your analysts, some of the information in there is really good, and other of it's a little more fluffy type of stuff. But we really encourage POCs because when we are tested, we consistently with the analyst and testing that's done, we have industry leading catch rates and things like that. So please, we love to do POCs. We love to go head to head with competition, and it's something very easy to stand up. Matt mentioned again that there's a pretty heavy partnership with VeloCloud. So from an SD-WAN standpoint, we're not doing our own SD-WAN, and a lot of customers already have a investment there where it seems like a heavy VeloCloud lean. So no matter what that is, the SD-WAN is a piece of that SASE framework. So we want to make sure that they're covered from an integration standpoint, and just a great example of leveraging investments they've already made, and we're not trying to force somebody's hand to put in pieces of a product or something that they don't need, right? We're focusing on the use cases they're trying to solve today. And then lastly, for my piece of it, this is just kind of a high level overview of the architecture. So no matter what type of users we're dealing with, if they're BYO devices, if they're a remote user or a branch office, they're going to be connecting through our control plane and going through our threat intelligence. We do integrate with the IDP that the customer has so that we know who that user is and can build in some of the zero trust aspects of it. And then depending on what they're accessing, if they're accessing internet or SaaS applications, obviously they go out and do that route. But on the back end, if it's web applications, if it's something in the data center, all that we have from a requirement for them to stand up is just a simple Docker container that's going to be in front of that resource that they would stand up. And we're going back and communicating with that. So also these resources, they're not publicly exposed from an address standpoint or an IP standpoint as well. And then now we've got some of the email security. Fareed, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I just wanted to take a few minutes to talk about our email security as well. Some of you guys might have heard that we recently acquired a company by the name of Avanan. That happened, I believe, in November of last year. FYI, I can't believe I'm saying last year already, but it happened in November of last year. What we did was we were actually using Avanan as an OEM product before the acquisition. And then, with the acquisition, now we're using a full-blown product in our email security. So this is the basic architecture that goes along with Avanan. Essentially, what happened was the founders of Avanan, they wanted to they wanted to be able to scan emails very quickly and have a extremely high catch rate to catch any malicious content in these emails. Your traditional email security gateways, what they do is they actually deliver the email to your inbox and then scan it, and if there's anything malicious in it, they will pull the email out of your inbox. Problem with that is malicious content can and will be delivered to your inbox. So if you're checking emails very quickly, as soon as they come in, you could be exposed. What Avanan did was they developed an API to tie directly into Office 365, and it scans the email before it gets to your inbox. And the scanning takes anywhere from 2 to 5 seconds. We make sure there's nothing malicious in it. There's no phishing links. If there's an attachment, there's nothing malicious in the attachment. And then if there's nothing in it, then obviously we deliver it to your inbox fairly quickly. If there is something malicious in it, we will destroy the contents of the email, and a notification will be sent to the admin saying we blocked X, Y, and Z. Now, this doesn't have to be the only solution, of course. We run parallel to your default EOP or ETP, or even if you have a Mimecast or Barracuda or whatever other email security server you have out there, we can run in parallel with it. We don't need to be the only solution. However, what we do offer is that we will have the highest catch rate in email security amongst all of our competitors. NSS Labs, back when they were around, when they did analysis on our email security catch rate, found that we were compliant with 100% of all email and HTTP, HTTPS malwares out there, right? So we have 100% catch rate. We had only about a 0.08% false positive, but everything else was caught. And that's thanks to our sandblast technology that the 25 plus years of experience in catching malware that Eric talked about earlier. That all ties into this Avanan solution. Next slide, please.
Now, this could be run real quick for you too. This could be run even if the customer has existing Office 365 security that they purchased for email.
Correct.
This can run at the same time, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So it runs parallel to it. Like I said, you can have any sort of other email security gateway or your default Office 365 EOP or ATP or whatever you have. You don't need to get rid of those in order to put in our solution.
And these are the applications then that you've got connections via API to have this protection.
That is right. So what this really shows is that we've evolved from going just to email security to protecting all of your collaboration tools. In the world we are in right now, email isn't the only way we communicate in the office now, right? We have Teams, we have SharePoint, OneDrive. There's a lot of different applications that we use to communicate with each other, to share documents, to collaborate. And so all of these applications you see, these are all protected with our email solution. Next slide, please. Now, finally, just a little more background on Avanan. Avanan was listed as a #1 in Gartner Peer Insights 3 years running. They've been ranked #1 in G2, and it was the fastest growing email security solution with a 686% growth since its evolution. We have over 5,000 customers right now. These are some of the big logos that we have right now, and yeah, we're just growing with our email solution. So that's my little blurb on Avanan and our email security, and it ties perfectly in with the SASE solution that Eric was talking about earlier.
And Fareed, just to clarify, we were incorporating your email security product going back 18 months ago.
That is right.
Had Avanan at the core, but you guys purchased that to bring it in, strengthen it, and expanded then the APIs that it connects to in the last 6 months, correct?
That's correct. So like I said earlier, we were using an OEM product from Avanan before we acquired them. And actually, before we acquired it, we were only offering the email solution, so Office 365. Yeah. With the acquisition, now we're able to provide email, Office 365, G Suite, all those other collaboration tools that we saw in the last slide.
Cool. All right.
A quick question: Are these all different licenses, or is like an all-in-one thing? Like somebody wants email security, is that a separate thing?
So great question. We can do separate SKUs. So if they only want email security, we have a SKU for email security. If they want to do email and Teams or any of these other collaboration tools, then we have a separate SKU for that. However, we do also have what we call a Harmony Total, which includes email. It includes Harmony Connect. Endpoint. We have mobile, so we have a lot of different solutions. So we do have one SKU that covers everything, or you can purchase a la carte, or you can bundle up different products within our Harmony suite.
And let me clarify that a little bit from CBTS's perspective and how we've been using it. We bundle together the Secure Web Gateway, ZTNA, and VPN access all as one cost, and that's either per user or per megabit. We typically are doing per megabit. Let's say you've got 10 locations and 500 employees. instead of charging per employee for 500 employees, we're just charging how much bandwidth they need going out to the internet, which again, you kind of take a look at a VeloCloud, not all that traffic necessarily is going to the firewall. Some of it might be local, et cetera. So those are bundled together, the secure web gateway, ZTNA, and VPN access. Then the email portion of it, or endpoint security, those are different SKUs. And on the email portion, then depending whether you want to add collaboration, that is a per user. Both of those are per users. But we can deliver all of this as a combined solution. But inside that secure web gateway, ZTNA, and VPN all come together. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Matt, this is Hazelhurst. So just to make sure I understand, got a user says, I want to look at something like a Mimecast or a Proofpoint. Is this something I can come directly to you guys for, and you guys can handle that piece of it only for that end user? Or does it have to be bundled with the VPN, ZTNA, all that other stuff?
It does not have to be bundled. Now,
okay.
One of the things, as you guys have worked with CBTS, and I want to talk a little bit about that, you know, we have been known in the channel, right, for first bringing out kind of our Cisco-based UCAS and CCAS, and then get strong in SD-WAN security now is happening for us. The secure web gateway, ZTNA, and VPN clients, those all happen at the normal kind of monthly recurring revenue and the normal kinds of commissions to agents they expect. As we start layering on other parts of our security practice, other components, they kind of sold a little bit more traditional VAR methodology, so they may be a little less commission to the customer. So those are some things we might want to talk about. But absolutely, if you had a customer that needed just that email security, we can deliver that. We just have to figure out some of the commission. It wouldn't be as robust as the secure web gateway or SD-WAN. Does that make sense?
No, it makes total sense. But I mean, like, you know, right, sometimes we just get in with a wedge, right? Hey, I need to talk SD-WAN. Hey, exactly. I need to talk Proofpoint. And that's all we got to start, right? So we got to be able to come to you guys with that. So that's perfect.
That's exactly it. Absolutely.
Yeah, just bring it to me, guys, and I'll quarterback that for you from whoever in the organization.
That's a good segue here. Let me just, I got 2 more slides and I'm going to get you to the stake. So hold on just a second. Should have been ready. I apologize. Rob Messmer's going to kick my butt afterwards here. All right. So I wanted to end up with just a couple of slides just to kind of remind you guys again, and most of you know, but just to let you know, this is part of our whole suite of services, right? Whether it's, you know, delivering anything to do with our UCAS and CCAS services, which, by the way, we're doing a lot more 5.9 business lately. We are a certified 5.9 installer. We're network connected to them, and we're doing quite a bit of 5.9 where we, you know, WebEx calling is still growing. WebEx contact center, I mean, is still growing, but 5.9 for us has been a great wedge as well, or a great addition. So we've got that available. We've had a lot of success with the entire Meraki stack as a service. We've just closed a deal right now where there's 50 warehouses, each of about 30 APs, and we're coming in and doing all the walkthrough spectrum analysis, the design work, the installation of these 30 APs, and deliver them then kind of a new next generation Wi-Fi experience for their voice picking and those kinds of things. Microsoft Teams continues to be a growing practice for us. We've been a direct route provider for a while, but we absolutely are moving more and more into just delivering managed Teams environment. More and more customers are saying, hey, the Teams Cloud PBX is enough. We want you to come in and help us manage it. And so they're giving us co-admin rights to their team environment, and we become the moves, adds, and changes and design for that. So that's a growing business for all of us in the industry. The SD-WAN practice, of course, you guys.
Matt, and St. Luke's is a large Telarus deal that was taken down in last year, which was how many handsets?
No, that's a great point. Thank you. St. Luke's, 20,000 handsets, over 300 locations, big hospital healthcare network. They had 20 different PBXs across this environment, and they made a corporate decision about a year ago to completely move to Teams. Now, they thought they could move everything to Teams. We got engaged with them. We walked through and did discovery, a bunch of work sessions with them. basically explained to them that we thought we could get somewhere around 30 or 40% of their users in Teams, but there were still a lot of workflows like high density analog lines and shared lines for nurses stations that still weren't done very well in Teams. They kicked us out of there. Like 6 months ago, they said, get the hell out of here. We're going somewhere else. We don't believe you. They went to 8x8 for about 6 weeks, kicked 8x8 out and brought us back in and said, wait a minute, apparently you guys know what's going on. And so we've come in and given them a complete plan, and we're working through it right now. It'll take us about 18 months to go through. But again, this is a Telarus One deal where we're going through basically department, hospital, department and clinics, et cetera, ambulatory, going by each of these, determining which workloads can go up into Teams, which still need to be in our UCaaS platform today because Teams can't do some of these things. And then over time, as Teams has it, we'll just move those services in. So yeah, we've developed quite a practice. So thank you, Rob, of being able to help people understand which call flows can go in Microsoft Teams today, which might still need to be on their customer premise PBX or in our UCaaS cloud, and help them on that journey. Yep. And then we just talked about cloud security, of course. This is part of a whole security practices that we're bringing into the channel here. We've got some $100 million a year security practice. It's typically, though, been more upmarket. It's been more enterprise business, kind of Fortune 3000 and above. Not that that's a real number, but mostly larger enterprises. And as the need, and you guys see it, this need in the mid-market space, the customers 100 to 5,000 employees they need help. At the same time, we've been moving our services down. So we now are starting to put together things like this bundle, if you would, that talk about, bringing everything from, scanning to patch management. We use some products like Big Fix or Avanti for that. Threat detection. We use our Alert Logic and some partnerships, Duo and Okta on the multi-factor authentication, Trend, Cisco, Checkpoint and the endpoint protection, backup, Commvault and others, these kinds of things. But now we're probably not a good fit for a 50-person firm, but when you start to get into larger mid-markets, call it 500 employees and above, who need some more specialized help, these are the kinds of things that we could start to bring to the table for you. And you guys mentioned it earlier, like, hey, if I've got somebody who's looking at proof point and we want to wedge in to come in on that email side, that's absolutely some of the things we can do. So this is all I had right here. I'll stop. Are there any other questions, any thoughts? Because I want to turn you over to the barbecue man, to the steak man. Anything at all?
I'm good here. Thank you.
Oh, cool. All right. Well, we hope this has been useful. Let's have some fun. I'm going to get myself a glass of wine here. And Andy, it's all yours. I'll stop sharing and take the screen.
Right on, guys. How's everybody doing?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. Everybody can see and hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Cool. Well, yeah.
Where's your beer?
I'm Andy. My beer? I'm doing dry January, you guys. It's depressing.
Oh, no.
I know. But, it's been a long 18 months.
All right.
Gotta get in there. But I will still talk about drink pairings. That's one of my favorite things to do in these classes. So first, before we get into anything on the meat, anything like that, if you do have a drink and you're not doing dry January, here's a couple things that I really like. So first of all, red wine pairs amazingly well with pretty much any steak, but specifically Wagyu. The main reason for this is the tannins that are in the red wine actually chemically combine with the fat molecules that are kind of dissolved and coated on all over the inside of your mouth, and it strips those from your palate. So essentially, every time you take a bite, when you go to take a sip afterwards and you go back for that next bite, it's kind of like experiencing that first bite all over again. So I like really big cabs are my absolute favorite with a steak. Red blends, as long as they're pretty bold. Anything with a lot of tannic structure is really, really awesome for steak. If you are not a wine person, beer. I like you can go two different ways on beer. The first one being I like lighter European styles. So like Pilsner, Kolsch, more traditional European, not necessarily light beer as we know it in the United States. So with the amount of craft breweries that are around, you should be able to find some pretty good stuff. Pilsner, another one, Helles, just those are a couple light European style. They're a little bit sweeter. They work well with the steak. Now you can go the exact opposite with beer as well, and go with your darker beers like your porters and stouts and things like that. One of the reasons that works really well with a steak is we are going to put a great sear on this, and anything roasted works well with dark beers because they use roasted malts themselves. So that color that you see in a beer is actually, it's a lot like coffee beans. They take the malt and they roast them, and that's what gives you that color. It also gives you a little bit of that smoky, kind of sweeter, smokier kind of thing that those dark beers are good at. Pairs really well with the sear that we're going to put on the steak. In the same kind of vein, if you're not a beer drinker, bourbon is absolutely my favorite thing as far as a liquor goes to pair with steaks. For many of the same reasons that dark beer works really well, whiskey, bourbon specifically, works awesome because it is aged in oak barrels that have been charred on the inside. So you can see a theme. We're adding a char, a sear, something like that. Those flavors tend to work really, really well together. So if you don't want to drink just straight up bourbon and you want to do a cocktail with it, I highly recommend an old fashioned. So you'll get a little bit of a citrus, a little bit of sweetness, in addition to that wonderful bourbon flavor. So I'll give you guys a second to, if anybody needs to run and grab something, those are my favorite things to pair with steak.
I heard
another thing.
Go
ahead.
I heard this team likes bourbon, and I'm in Kentucky. The next time I do an event with you need something, call first.
I will definitely be getting a hold of you because I need to go down and do the tour in Kentucky.
All right, keep going.
Another thing too, you guys seem like a lot of fun. I just want to reiterate, this is super loose, open. If you guys have questions at any point, interrupt me, let me know. This is the most fun when we can interact. So I don't want this feeling like a presentation by any means. So feel free, ask your questions. I'm going to go through a bunch of different stuff, throw some science stuff at you. But really, it's all about having fun and you guys walking away with some confidence in being able to cook a steak perfectly every time.
What's your favorite cooking show?
Oh, man. I am a child of Elton Brown and Good Eats. I grew up on that show. When I was a kid, I used to watch it religiously. So much so that he actually came through Minneapolis doing his live tour, and my wife and I went and saw it. It was super fun. But he is the guy that I looked up to the most because he not only told you how to cook something, but why it was cooked that way. And I took a lot of that from him because it was like a cooking show meets Bill Nye the Science Guy, right? And so, I'm not one to just take things at face value most of the time. So his explanations of the science behind things were really fantastic, really interested me. So that's kind of my style, as you will see, is very similar to kind of the Elton Brown. I don't have the refrigerator camera or anything awesome like that, but he is definitely my favorite. Great question. Okay, so at this point, I'm guessing all of you guys have heard of Wagyu, right? I used to say raise your hand if you've heard of Wagyu, but at this point, I'm going to say raise your hand if you don't know what Wagyu is. Or have heard of it, I should say. All right. So, and sorry, if I'm looking down, I'm not ignoring you guys. My monitor's down here and the camera's up here. So, Wagyu simply translated means beef in Japanese. And so a long time ago, 1800s, a bunch of Japanese ranchers discovered that the particular breed that they were working on, certain cattle out of the flock had way higher marbling, way higher fat content than other cattle. They noticed that this marbling, or like I said, intramuscular fat, and that's the fine white striations that occur like within the steak, not the fat cap on the outside or the big chunks of fat. I'm talking about the little tiny striations inside. They discovered that when there's more of those, the meat was a lot richer, a lot more flavorful. So what they did was they started breeding those cattle that were showing those traits. And kind of unknowingly, what they did was they took a recessive gene and they bred it to be the dominant gene of the breed. Again, this happened in the 1800s, early 1800s. And so over the course of generations, now we have gotten to a point with Japanese beef where it's really, when you talk Japanese beef, it is always going to be super heavily marbled. That's what they went after, and that's what they achieved. The Japanese treat beef very differently than Americans do, much smaller portions. But the reason for that is the richness. And if you haven't had a heavily marbled Wagyu steak yet, you'll find out when you cook this one, because normally I'm a very large man, and normally I can, I'll do a 30-ounce ribeye, something like that. But when it comes to Wagyu, it's so rich that after like 8 to 12 ounces, I'm like, I'm good. This is enough. So that brings me to how did this get here in the United States? So, like I said, the Japanese, they treat beef very differently. A lot of these cattle, if you were to buy this steak in Japan or from a Japanese source, it would actually come with paperwork, like a racehorse almost, to prove the genetics. So they're very protective. They did not let a whole lot of them out. The United States purchased 4 head of cattle in the 1970s. And immediately we started breeding those here. And then we bought 36 more in the 90s, mid 90s. And then in the early part of the 90s, there was like 4 more that were thrown in. So essentially all the Wagyu that exists in the United States comes from less than 50 head of cattle. This is a really interesting steak because this one, the Japanese genetics were kept. So they kept the breeding line pure. If anybody out there has seen the term American Wagyu, typically what that means is it's 50% Japanese genetics and 50% like Black Angus. Typically it's Black Angus, so it's like a 50-50 split. Nothing against the American Wagyu. It is fantastic. The nice thing about Black Angus is it's super consistent. So when they brought the Wagyu into the mix, they were getting a lot more marbling, but at a more consistent rate. Wagyu, not as consistent. But this steak, pure Japanese genetics. A couple interesting things happened in the breeding over time. So I was telling you that they took that recessive gene and made it a dominant gene. What it did too was also chemically changed the fat, the marbling that you see in this steak. So in Japanese Wagyu, and in our Wagyu as well, there is a higher concentration of unsaturated fat to saturated fat. So if this was a Black Angus steak, the marbling on the inside of it, it would be a much more, it's a little bit harder fat. Whereas with this, if you leave it out, the fat content of this will actually start to render at room temperature. That's how soft it is. It's incredible stuff. So that's a little bit on the history of Wagyu. I certainly can go deeper into it if anybody has extra questions, but I don't want to give you a history lesson. We're here to eat some steak, right? All right.
Andy, I didn't get a steak at my house here, but what cut are you working on today?
Yeah, so we are working with a New York strip.
Oh, I had one of those 2 months ago from you, and it was incredible. Yep.
It's unbelievable. One thing I love about doing a New York strip for these classes is everybody here has probably experienced a New York strip. So you really get to kind of see the difference. It's not a more exotic cut that you don't see all the time. So you really get to tell the difference between the two. Okay. So New York strip. For those of you who don't know, a New York strip is the large side of a T-bone or a porterhouse steak, depending on where on the spinal column it's taken from. So if you've ever seen a T-bone, there's a big side and a smaller side. This is the big side from that. So you can tell your friends that you know that now. Okay. I am going to run through kind of the basic, I'm going to give you guys the rundown of the basic cook that we're going to do. You can certainly do this steak on a grill. I love doing it over, on open flames, stuff like that. However, I have found the best way to cook Wagyu is in a cast iron pan. You can still do that on a grill and kind of get the best of both worlds. I like to do on the stove, especially for these classes, because I know everybody here has a stove and can at least have access to a cast iron pan. They're super inexpensive. You can go to Target and buy one of the Lodge ones for, I think they're $20. But one of the reasons I love cast iron is that sear that it gives. And that sear is something called the Maillard reaction. And that happens when the surface of the pan comes in contact with the meat, and then I just lost my train of thought. It reacts, there it is. It reacts with the amino acids and the natural sugars in the steak. And in that reaction, it actually throws off a whole bunch of other flavors that you're going to get. So a little bit of smokiness, some sweetness, a little bit of nuttiness. So the sear on a steak is completely the most important part. If you have just a steak that was cooked without putting any sort of sear on it, it's gray, it's lifeless, it doesn't have a ton of flavor. So super important. When you're cooking in cast iron, that sear is on the entire surface. It's not just on grill grates. It's not anything, the diamond pattern or anything like that. So that's one of the reasons I really, really like doing it this way. And I have tried cooking steaks just about every way possible. And time again, it comes back to the cast iron. So what we want
is there a better temperature for searing? Or do you just want to turn it as hot as possible?
So that's a great question. I was just going to get there. 450 to 600 is about the range that I like to be at in the cast iron. Some of it depends on the thickness of the steak. The thinner the steak, the hotter I want to go, because the less time it's going to be in that pan to get to the doneness that I'm looking for. So great question. Anything above 450, you'll definitely get there. I like to choose 500 as a good center point, because you'll always have pretty good a pretty good result with 500. All right.
And how do you determine that if you're going to do it on the stove?
Right. So there's a couple ways. I am going to use a little bit of grapeseed oil in the cast iron. One of the reasons I really like grapeseed oil is I can put, like a dime-sized bit in there, rub it around, and then it has a high smoke point and a neutral flavor. That's one of the reasons I really like it. So a couple things: vegetable oil's good, canola oil's good, grapeseed oil's good. The thing you want to avoid is using olive oil in your pan. It has a lower smoke point, so it will burn quicker, and it gives a flavor that I don't necessarily want on my I heard avocado oil is good, nice high smoking point, but it does have a bit of a flavor. So I try to stay with the one I like the best is definitely grapeseed oil. And to answer your question about how do you get to the temperature, so I know when I start to see tiny little plumes of smoke in my pan that it's right at that 500-degree point, and that's when I put it on. There's other ways. I also have a thermopen with an infrared reader, so I can take surface temperatures. These are really cool. If you don't have one of these, with the IR reader, I would highly suggest picking up any sort of instant read thermometer. I'm going to get into that in just a second, talking about doneness and how we know how long to have the steak on and what temperatures to cook at. So this tool is incredible. So back to the overall process before we get into it. We're going to put it in the pan. I'm going to have it in the pan for a little while, flip it a couple times, and then I'm going to add some butter as well as some garlic, rosemary, and thyme. And then we're going to baste that butter mixture over top of the steaks. And then we're going to pull them off. We're going to let them rest. And then you cut into them and enjoy it. So if anybody needs to get anything ready right now for that, if you want to cook along with me, get those things. I'm not turning on the pan yet. I got a couple more things I want to talk about. First, I'll get back into the instant read thermometer. So whenever you're cooking meat or almost anything except for baking, I cook by temperature, not by time. Every piece of meat is different. Every steak is going to render a little different. So the only way to know that you're absolutely nailing the doneness is to have an instant read thermometer and check that thickest part of the steak. And I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a, if you can remember that 120 degrees equals rare, you've got the rest of it figured out. It's a little cheat. So 120 is rare, then it's just 10-degree increments all the way up. 130 is medium rare, 140 is medium, 150 is medium well, and 160 is well done. So 120 is rare. That's all you have to remember, and then it's 10 degrees each way up. I am going to cook this to medium rare. That's my favorite temp to do a steak at. So that means I'm actually going to pull this thing off of the pan when it gets to about 122 to 125 degrees. The reason I'm doing that is there will be a little bit of a carryover in the cook. As soon as I get it out of the pan, it'll continue to rise. So I usually give it 5 to 7 degrees, and then it will end at that 130-degree mark, giving me perfect medium rare. As opposed to if I was to keep that in the pan until it hit 130 degrees, then pull it. Now I'm into 135 to 137. Definitely a little bit more on the medium side, and I don't want that. So that brings me to my next thing. Did everybody get some of this rub? Yes. Okay, cool. Awesome. So rubs on steak. This is one of the few that I actually really love on steaks. Most of the time I'm using kosher salt and coarse black pepper, and that's it. I don't want to add a lot of sweetness or other flavors to my steak. This is a very simple rub. It also has a lower sugar content than a lot. So one of the reasons you don't want sugar on your steak is when you get it in the pan, it will actually burn. At 500 degrees, that sugar will start to burn, and you'll get an acrid off flavor that's not conducive to a good steak. So this Elk Creek is awesome on everything. I'm glad you guys got some. So I'm going to give you a couple tips on seasoning, and we're actually going to get this thing seasoned right now. All right. So one thing you guys will notice, and this is a teaching moment. So this is a little bit discolored. When this steak was shipped to me, there was a tiny hole in the bag. I put it in another Ziploc bag just to make sure that it was safe, and it turned brown. This is completely normal, completely safe. If oxygen hits the surface, especially while it's in the fridge, not a big deal at all. You know, if you ever run into a piece of meat that you're concerned about, the smell test is absolutely, it's never steered me wrong. This smells completely fresh, completely normal, but there was a tiny air leak, so it is slightly oxidized. It's not that bright red color that we usually have. So I figured I would address that if anybody else had that issue. All right, so for seasoning, I want to keep the seasoning about a foot off of the surface of the steak as I'm doing this. And the reason for this is I want even coating. Just like that. I see a lot of people on internet videos, stuff like that, where they're seasoning down like this. That's really hard to get an even coat. So you'll have one section of the steak that be super heavily seasoned and one that's not seasoned enough. So always season, even if it's, you know, your salad or something, you're always season up high, so you can get a good even coating on there. All right, so this is a pretty thick cut, so I'm gonna get a good coat on there. Then I'm gonna flip it over, and I'm gonna do the same thing on this side. All right, now there's a lot of overspray on this board from seasoning up that high, but it will not go to waste. I just like to take my finger and bring it in and then roll the sides into the excess, so I'm not wasting any of the rub.
Andy,
Okay.
when you're grilling up steaks or meat like this, do you ever trim off any of the fat caps? Like if I buy a steak and I feel like I got a 1/2-inch fat cap somewhere?
Great question. Yes, I will. In this scenario, the fat cap that's on mine specifically is about perfect. It's about 1/4 of an inch all the way across, which when this goes into the pan, we're going to give that fat cap some special attention right away and render some of that down. So it actually has a great feel, you know, has a great mouth feel instead of being gross and chewy. It's going to be super tender and play into the rest of the bite that we're taking. So on this one, definitely, but I have had some where it's just an excessive amount of fat that you're not going to render properly. So you can take it down. My rule is about 1/4 of an inch fat cap is about perfect. And I use that on steaks. I use that on brisket is a great example. The fat cap on a brisket, I'll take that to about 1/4 inch on the top. But having that fat there for me is important because there is tons of flavor there. Fat equals flavor. As much as we don't want to admit that, it is delicious. And so especially on a New York strip where you can actually slice this, so each bite has that little fat cap attached to it in addition to the rest of the steak, it's really the perfect bite.
Cool. Thank you.
Great question. All right. So I'm going to let this sit for a couple minutes. The reason for this is as the salt from this rub comes in contact with the surface of the steak, osmosis is going to occur and it is going to start to pull water from the surface. Just a little bit, not a ton. You can certainly do this for longer periods and kind of get more of that water content out. So if you've ever had a dry aged steak, what they do is they take that steak and they put it in essentially a refrigerator and then run cold air over it. And it evaporates all of the water content, leaving you with a steak that is essentially beef concentrate. More beefy flavor. It's more tender because if a steak has a lot of water in it and you go to cook it, that water will boil and then you're effectively steaming the inside of the steak. What we're going to do, leaving this here for 5 minutes is not a dry age. And this steak is such high quality that it doesn't need any help in that aging process. But putting this on and leaving it for 5 minutes is going to get some of the excess moisture to the surface that is just below the surface. And once that's out of the steak, then we can get a better sear. So I like to give it about 5 minutes to sit, get some of that moisture to the surface. Does that make sense?
Yep.
All right. I think we're just about ready. I'm going to kick this on. So I know that on my stove, it's an electric stove. I use about 6.5 out of 10 will get me to just about the exact right temperature. I know other people, if you have a gas range, usually wide open is probably the way to go to get that 500. Did I see a master built smoker? Is that what's going on in the background there?
No, it's a pit boss.
Oh, it is a pit boss. Awesome.
So I'm going to smoke mine.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to sear it on the grill.
J-Dub.
Yeah. So that is another
working
option that I want to talk. Go ahead.
J-Dub is working the big one. I'm working the little mini green mountain.
I like it. So one thing you guys could definitely do with this, I feel like this cut is thick enough. If you did want to do a reverse sear, I love doing reverse sear, but typically I only do it if the steak is like 1.5 inches or thicker, just because it doesn't take long for it to get to the temperature that you need, and you don't get enough flavor if it's a thin steak. So for those of you who don't know, a reverse sear is basically the opposite of what we're doing. You're going to start at a low temperature and get some smoke flavor on, and then bring it almost to done. So for me on a reverse sear, if I'm looking to get medium rare, I like to pull my steak off at about 115 degrees internal temperature and then get it on that high heat so I can get the sear, and then still try to pull it around that 125 to 127 range. Give it a little bit more room. It's not going to rise up as much because you've already done some of the cooking in the first place. But yeah, really, really fantastic way to do steaks as well.
Did you say on that you recommend a more of a thin cut for your steaks?
Thick. The thicker
thick.
the cut, the better a reverse sear works. A lot of times I'll do like some of those tomahawk ribeyes that are like 40 ounces and they're 3 inches thick. To try to sear that thing and get that internal temperature to where it needs to be is damn near impossible. So I'll put that on for 90 minutes at 225 on either my Traeger. Sometimes I'll do it on my offset smoker, and bring that so that the very dead center of that is almost done, and then get your sear on.
What are your thoughts on direct on the coals?
It's okay. I think it's certainly fun to do. It's fun to, take videos of and share with people. But ultimately the flavor, you don't have enough control over the temperature. And so for me, the flavor, you get a little bit too much of a char. Whereas in the cast iron, it's much more controllable, and the sear that I'm getting is super uniform, and every bite is going to be amazing. I've done the cowboy style, throwing it right in the coals. And honestly, it's not my favorite way to do it. Just because you get some parts actually burn. And like I said earlier, I'm not trying to burn the outside of this. I'm trying to get that Maillard reaction, which is a very specific, very specific thing. It's not black. It's that super dark mahogany kind of color. So good question. All right. I am going to reset my camera here really quick, so you guys can see over at the stovetop, and I will be back in 15 seconds.
I'm learning a lot. I should have saved the steak from last night.
This was an awesome idea, by the way.
Yeah, these are a lot of fun.
Like it?
We've done like 4 or 5 with Andy now. He just does a great job.
J-Dub, did you throw cast iron in your smoker or no?
No. I should.
No.
That would be awesome.
Well, and if you're doing low temperature smoking, the cast iron is not going to give you any benefits. It's only for the sear. So if you have like if you're doing it on a smoker and then you want to put it on like a propane grill that's really hot, then I would put your cast iron in there, get it heated up, set it to 500, get it heated up, and then do your sear, and that'd be perfect.
All right. Yeah. Right now I have it at 200 for the temperature for smoking.
Yep, and that's perfect for the reverse sear. Okay. I am starting to see some wisps of smoke come off of this. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm actually going to give that fat cap a little bit of attention. We're going to get that going just to start rendering that down a little bit so it's nice and delicious. Dun, dun, dun.
Andy, for Christmas, my brother gave me a 1930 Wagner cast iron, 12-inch.
Oh!
It was a Christmas gift, absolutely.
That is an incredible Christmas gift. That's awesome. I don't have anything quite that amazing.
Yeah.
I do have the Smithy, if you've ever seen these. This was a lovely birthday present from my wife, and I cherish this pan. But you certainly don't have to spend this kind of money on cast iron to get good results.
I've looked at
vintage
stuff. I
stuff.
didn't want to buy it either. Yes, exactly.
Okay. I'm going to grab the tongs. I like using tongs just because I feel like I have a little bit more control. There's been a lot said about piercing the steak and not piercing the steak. And honestly, it's not a big enough deal if you do want to use a fork to flip it. The science has come out and said it really doesn't make a difference. You're not going to lose that much juice out of that. So first thing I do once I get this side down, I'm just gently pushing this down to make sure I have even contact so that we're, like I said, building this sear the way we want it to go. Again, I also have here some fresh rosemary, thyme, and garlic. And I like to leave the garlic in the wrapper. You'll get all the flavor of the garlic, but it will not burn because the wrapper will protect it. So at the end of this, you might have some nice roasted garlic to eat if you're a fan of garlic. All right, so I'm going to give this about a minute or two on this first side. You can already start to see that that mahogany color is already starting. So after about one more minute on this side, I'm going to add my butter. And so for this, I'm going to use, I don't know, probably 3, maybe 4 tablespoons just to get some liquid in the pan. And what's cool about that is we're going to be infusing a lot of the herbs and the rendered fat and all that stuff. We're going to be kind of throwing that back on top of this, infusing it with flavor. But then at the end, we're also going to have a really nice dipping sauce. So I'll actually use that pan sauce over the top of the steak. All right, let's call it that. So what I like to do, get the butter in, and then have your steak kind of backed up a little bit so you have some working room in front. And then once this butter gets a little more melted, I'm going to add all of these herbs and garlic in, and you'll start to hear that popping and snapping. That's the thyme. That is no issue at all. It's the water releasing from the actual individual thyme leaves. All right. Now I'm going to flip back over to this first side. And I've got a big spoon here. And then I just tilt this pan down. And I like to kind of soak the herbs in. And then start taking that and just spooning that mixture over the top.
And you still kept all the
And
heat
this,
on this. You still kept, Andy, you still kept all the heat on this too, right? Your burner's still on?
say that one more time.
You kept all the heat on. Your burner's still on right now at 450 or 500.
Yep, it's still rolling. So one thing is I'm putting the butter in, and butter does have a low smoke point, so it can burn fairly quickly. But I'm trying to keep it moving by basting it over the top. And give me 1 second. We have to quick switch out a battery. It'll take 5 seconds. I'll be right back with you.
Did he mention if he's hiring for a cameraman and taste tester?
That's right, exactly. I think
And I'm
he's
just
married.
wondering
He's
if
actually
this
married to
man
the
will keep me-
camera person. Yeah.
You
I'm
guys,
just wondering if this-
my marriage might have to fail before anybody gets that position. She's got that locked down.
I'm wondering if the pan will save the grill from catching on fire.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Oh, that is a great point that I normally talk about, and I totally forgot to bring up that point. So there is so much rendered fat in this cut that when you put it directly on the grates, that grease will drip. And if you do it in a pan, that is the best way to stop from having flare-ups.
Yep.
Not only that, the rendered fat is absolutely delicious, and you don't want to lose that into the bottom of a grill. So by doing this and basting, you're actually utilizing that fat. Okay. I'm going to do my first internal temp. Remember, for me, I want to be somewhere between 122 and 125. And we're about 85 degrees right now. So this will come up fairly quickly. I'm just going to get a little bit of extra on the edges as well. Give them some special attention.
And sorry, I didn't count at the beginning when you just gave the fat the special attention. How long was that about?
It was about a minute, maybe even a little less. It really depends on how much fat is on there. Sometimes I give it a little bit more, sometimes I give it a little bit less. But a minute is that's a good barometer. All right. And your kitchen might get a little smoky. That's okay. Just have somebody at the ready waving at the smoke alarm. All right. So now this steak it's right on the border for me of whether or not I just do it all in the pan or if I throw it in the oven. So that might be something, if you ever get a little bit thicker steak like this, you could actually have an oven going at 375 to 400 degrees and take this pan and put it in the oven and then finish that cook there. I'm going to just pull it in. So we're going to get a really nice crust on this. But yeah, we're almost to 100 degrees.
You're a great
right about
cast
100
iron
right there.
salesperson.
So. What's that?
I said you're a great cast iron salesperson. I got to go buy one now.
That's right.
I need to get an endorsement deal with a cast iron company. I use this pan for everything. It really is an incredible piece. Turn this on the side one more time. Yeah, that is just what a amazing sear we got going on. And it's interesting, different steaks sear a little bit different because of how much fat content they have. And this one is incredible today. Really, really nice. All right. I'm actually going to add a little bit more butter just to give us a tad bit more as we're spooning it over. And then I'm going to check my temp one more time. By the way, if you do this with the herbs and the garlic, your kitchen is going to smell incredible. It's really one of my favorite things about doing a steak like this. So one. So I'm getting right about, let's see, kind of in the dead center. I'm at about 120. So I'm going to give it one more baste, and then I'm going to pull this off, and we're going to rest this steak. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the importance of resting. Super important. As much as you want to just tear into this thing right away, trust me, wait, it will be worth your time.
Andy, I have a daughter, oldest daughter, and then two younger sons. They're all 36 to 28 now. My middle son, we had a family gathering about 6 months ago. We cooked up some meat. My middle son tried to explain to me that resting was unimportant on a piece of meat. And we almost had a family fight. I finally had to Stuart, shut the hell up. I'm not talking about this anymore. It was hilarious.
I will give you some good pointers for the next round.
All right.
Okay, I'm pulling that off the heat. I'm going to take my pan off of the heat as well because, again, we've got a great pan sauce going right there. I don't want it to burn and keep cooking, so I'm going to pull it off the heat right away. And then we're going to reset the camera one more time, and I'll meet you guys back at the cutting board.
Josh, how's yours going?
He's putting out a fire.
I thought I had you on mute. So I put my cast iron in my smoker, but I buttered my cast iron, and the flat point made it ultra hot. So I pulled that. I didn't put my steak on yet, and then I turned on my Blackstone, which is a griddle. It's like a cast iron griddle. And then I went ahead and did the steak with butter on the Blackstone. Yes.
So one thing I did want to
pulling it off
mention,
right now.
If you're using a Blackstone or a grill for that matter, one of the things that we can do is I like to take the herbs. So I make a garlic butter. I actually dice up the garlic, put it in the butter. Then I take the rosemary and the thyme, and I'll actually take like a bread tie and tie them around the end of a spoon and basically create a paintbrush. And so you can basically dip in that garlic butter and paint the steak as you're cooking it. It's a great method. You're still going to get a ton of flavor. But if you don't have the ability to spoon the mixture over, like, a Blackstone is a perfect example, you'll still be able to get it spread on there nicely and get all that flavor. Okay.
Now, when you rest your steaks, whether it's Wagyu or your own critter or whatever, do you cover them? You take them off at 120, cover them in aluminum foil, or do you just rest them?
I just rest them. Here's the thing about I get that question a lot, and it's called tenting, where you put like aluminum foil or something over the top of it. What I have found is there is a lot of heat coming off, as well as steam, and that steam will actually start to collect at the top of that and continue the cook further than I want it to go. So especially on a steak, it's such a small piece of meat compared to like a 20-pound brisket. I don't need to cover it up. I just give 5 minutes of resting. That's all you need. So the next time whoever got in the argument with their son,
it was me.
There was a study that was done where they took 4 steaks that were cut from basically the exact same part of the animal. They were cooked exactly the same to the same temperature. The only difference was they cut into one immediately. They gave one 5 minutes to rest, 10 minutes to rest, and 20 minutes to rest. And then they weighed the steaks to find out how much of the rendered fat, the juice, had run out. Yep. And the difference between letting a steak rest just 5 minutes versus cutting into it immediately was 20%. So 20% of the weight ran out of that steak, cutting into it immediately.
Yep.
That juice, it needs a little bit of time to get reabsorbed by the muscle fibers. You're still going to see some juice come out, but after 5 minutes, you've taken in a lot, because after 10 minutes of resting, there was only like a 2 or 3% difference between 5 and 10 minutes. And then I think a 1 or 2 minute or percent difference between 10 and 20 minutes. Now, this all also goes to the larger the piece of meat, the longer it needs to rest. So if I'm doing a 20-pound brisket, sometimes I will rest that thing wrapped in aluminum foil, wrapped in everything, put in a cooler. Sometimes I'll do that for 6 or 7 hours. And it's still 140 degrees when you pull it out and slice into it, but it takes time for all those rendered juices to reabsorb. For most steaks, 5 minutes is all you need, because I'm also a fan of eating my steak hot. I don't want to sit and wait for it. So yeah, 5 minutes, all you need. But it makes the world of difference. All right.
So yeah, Matt, you can go ahead and punch your kid in the face. He doesn't know what he's talking about.
Oh my God, we seriously were that close. I had to actually ask him to stop speaking because it was close to fisticuffs. It was the weirdest thing ever. It's like the only time it's happened maybe since he was 13 or something.
How old is he?
He's 20. Actually, he's 31 now. Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, he probably was on a barbecue forum somewhere where somebody told him different.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That'll happen.
Talk a little bit, and other times we've done this. People have asked you what are some of your other favorite cuts of meat and some weird cuts that you mentioned. Go ahead and talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, we're dealing with a New York strip here, so that's something everybody gets all the time. It is my favorite Wagyu cut because it's the perfect amount of marbling, in my opinion. There is such a thing as too much marbling, and if you've ever seen a Japanese Wagyu ribeye, it almost looks like Spam because it's just like almost solid fat, and that's almost too much. So with Wagyu, I'm a New York strip guy. When it comes to just like prime grade Black Angus, definitely a ribeye guy. That's where I go for sure, is the ribeyes. But as people get more educated on steaks and butchering and the whole process, and the internet has also showed us all of these different cuts from all over the world, because that's the I don't know who's talking. Who's on? Somebody muted.
It's Haas.
It's always
no
Haas.
worries.
It's always Haas.
So one interesting thing is we think about, there's only one way to butcher cattle, right? You can only get these steaks. But all over the world, there's all these different cuts that are taken from different parts of the cow that we don't necessarily treat the same way. So a couple of the really fun ones to check out. My favorite probably is in the United States, it's called a Denver steak. And in Japan, it's called a zabuton. And it's this awesome most of the time you see it in cubes. And it's actually a piece of meat that comes from the chuck primal that's right underneath the shoulder blade of the animal. So it's also not ridiculously expensive, especially if you can find like the Wagyu version of it is insanely marbled, insanely flavorful, and it's not going to cost you an arm and a leg because it comes from the chuck primal, which most chuck cuts, I mean, that's a lot of working and movement. So a lot of them are tough, not super tender, but because this steak comes from underneath the shoulder blade, it's actually a non-working muscle, therefore gets super flavorful, super tender. So if you can remember Denver steak or zabuton, either one of those, they're the same thing. The other one, if you can get Wagyu flank steak, it's really fantastic. And the French actually make steaks out of it, and it's called bavette. And bavettes are also fantastic if they have enough marbling. They can be pretty tough if they don't. So that's one to check out as well. And then one of the ones that's becoming more and more popular all the time I see is picana. And picana is known as basically top sirloin cap in the United States. So in South America, Brazil specifically, they call it the queen cut because it's second only to ribeye amongst those people. And that steak is super good. And usually in the United States, we cut the sirloin like this. And so there's this small muscle at the top that has this beautiful fat cap on it. But it becomes part of a top part of the steak. In South America, they actually butcher it this way. So you get this little roast that the whole thing has a beautiful fat cap on it. The traditional way of cooking it in South America is to use a rotisserie over open flames. And if there's so much fat cap on it, that is one of the scenarios where I actually leave the fat cap, because when you're doing the rotisserie, it just keeps basting itself as it rolls, and it is unbelievable. So yeah, those are a couple fun ones to look at. All right, I've given too much time now. I am going to cut into this thing.
We're at the top of the hour for these guys, so yeah, let's wrap it up.
Let's do it. So, most important thing, again, the having that temperature instant read thermometer is incredible. So if I was to be serving this for like a dinner party and I wanted to be fancy, I just slice kind of at a bias across the grain like this.
How thick is that when you're slicing it that way? Just so it can be high maintenance at some point.
Yeah, so I do about, I don't know, 1/2-inch slices, and that might be even a little thick, but because I had that instant read thermometer, I mean, it is perfect medium rare.
Yep.
Absolutely fantastic. Okay.
Beautiful.
The part I almost forgot. Hold on.
Come on, Andy.
We take that pan sauce and just toss that right on the top. And that has got tons of flavor. So if you're doing veggies or anything as a side, that pan sauce is great to dip in there. Tons of flavor. So I'm going to wrap it up. I know you guys are at the top of the hour and got to get out of here. One thing I want to say, if you think of a question or something that you thought you should have asked during this, after the fact, please get a hold of me. I'll put my my social media channels out on the chat. I love talking about this stuff. I have people all the time from past classes shoot me messages. I kind of started doing this to take some of the pretentiousness out of cooking, and just share and, you know, help people out and help people feel more comfortable about cooking in a way that doesn't seem super intimidating. So at any point, if you guys have a question about something, Instagram is probably the best way to get a hold of me. BBQ with Boterman on there. I'll put that in the channel. But yeah, I appreciate it. Get a hold of me, guys. Enjoy these steaks. Thank you very much. This is a blast.
Any last questions for Andy?
Yeah, I have a question for you, Andy.
Sure.
So I'm actually on your barbecue with Boterman. What is the my account? Is there something that we can sign up for?
Oh, that is actually for. Yeah, that's for the corporate classes. So if you go to Instagram, let's see here. I'm going to write it in the chat right now.
I'm in Insta right now.
Yes. So there's that. I like to, I share tons of recipes. I'm also a photographer, so I really enjoy food photography, creating recipes, doing all that stuff. I work with a bunch of different companies all over the country, doing fun stuff for them too. So I don't have like an email list yet, but that is something we actually had a meeting about things we're going to do in this next year. And that is something that would be super fun. So I will. We have everybody's email that has taken the classes, so we will try to get that out and sign. If you want to sign up, then you can sign up.
There's so I'm close to Kansas City, which is the barbecue capital of the world.
It absolutely is.
We have what's called Operation Barbecue Relief. If that's something you have an interest in, I'm actually a member of that, and it's one of those where whenever you have natural disasters, you go and barbecue. It's a lot of fun. So I'm happy to share that with you as well if you have an interest in it.
Yes, please shoot me the information on that. I'm definitely friends with a lot of people who are involved in that, and I'd love to, if I could get involved and help, because that's such a great cause, such a cool thing. So yeah, definitely.
We got another quick question, Andy. Jason asked, what temperature do you typically pull brisket at?
Good question. So brisket is a little bit more complicated. I basically stop paying attention to the internal temperature after 195 degrees. After that, it just goes by feel. So typically it's somewhere between 200 and 207. I've had them go longer, I've had them go under, but the majority will be somewhere in that window. What you're looking for is get yourself the instant read thermometer if you don't have one already. And then I wrap somewhere in the stall, usually 165 to 170. And so when you go to check the temperature at the end of the cook, break through that wrap, and it should feel like melted butter. There should be no resistance whatsoever anywhere. And I check multiple places, check a couple places in the flat, check a couple places in the point. Typically the point will come to temperature quicker than the flat. That's one of the reasons brisket is so difficult, is because it's two different muscles that are coming to temperature at different times. But yeah, that's a long answer.
Perfect. Thank you.
You go by the feel for sure.
Yep.
Great question.
Andy, I want to wrap this up with telling you that we've done this now, I think 4 or 5 times with you. You do an effing fantastic job.
Thank you, Matt.
Literally, everybody has so much fun doing this. So thank you very much. Telarus guys, thank you. Scream for anything, but I hope this was useful for you. I know it's been fun for us every time. So
yeah,
thanks, guys.
Thank you. Let's do more, Matt. I'm here with you.
See you soon.
There you go. All right.
Cheers.
Hey guys. Cheers.
All right, bye, guys.